The Galactic Academy floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. It was built on Station Nexus 7, far away from any planet, in a place where ships from 100 different worlds could reach it easily. For 300 years, young students from across the galaxy had come here to learn. They studied science, diplomacy, and how to work together with species that looked nothing like them. The station was enormous. Its corridors stretched for miles, lined with windows that showed the endless stars outside. Gardens filled with plants from distant worlds grew under artificial sunlight. Classrooms held students with scales, fur, tentacles, and forms that human minds could barely understand. It was a place of wonder and learning, where the children of the galaxy's most powerful families prepared for their futures. And now, for the first time in its long history, the Academy had accepted a human student. Her name was Lily Carter. She was 17 years old, with brown hair that she kept tied back in a simple ponytail and green eyes that watched everything carefully. She came from a small town in Kansas, a place of wheat fields and wide skies, about as far from this space station as anyone could imagine. When she walked through the corridors of the Academy, she looked very small compared to most of the other students. The Corvins were tall reptiles who stood nearly 8 feet high, with scales the color of dark stone and yellow eyes that could see in the dark. The Villani were graceful beings with translucent blue skin and 8 limbs that moved like flowing water. The Filari were covered in soft golden fur and had large ears that could hear whispers from across a room. The Thrall were massive creatures with 4 arms and skin like rough tree bark. Among all these beings, Lily Carter looked like a child. She was smaller, weaker, and younger than almost everyone around her. Many of the other students did not even notice her when she passed by. Those who did notice her often looked at her with confusion or pity. What was this tiny creature doing in a place meant for the galaxy's best and brightest? Lily did not mind being overlooked. In fact, she preferred it. She had arrived at the Academy 3 months ago through Earth's new exchange program with the Galactic Federation. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for 200 years, which made them the newest species in the Federation. Most alien races saw humans as primitive newcomers who had not yet earned their place at the table. The exchange program was meant to change that, slowly, one student at a time. Lily's days followed a simple pattern. She woke early in her small room on the student level. She ate breakfast in the cafeteria, usually sitting alone at a table in the corner. She attended her classes, taking notes and listening carefully while her classmates showed off abilities she could not match. The Villani could solve complex mathematics in their heads faster than computers. The Corvins could crush metal with their bare claws. The Filari could sense emotions and sometimes even thoughts. What could a human do? Lily had asked herself this question many times during her first weeks at the Academy. The class she found most difficult was tactical simulations, taught by Commander Vorath. Vorath was a Corvin, old and scarred from decades of military service. His left eye was missing, replaced by a glowing red implant that could see through walls. He walked with a slight limp from an old battle wound, but no one dared to underestimate him. The Corvin species had dominated galactic warfare for thousands of years, and Vorath was one of their greatest living warriors. He did not like humans. On Lily's first day in his class, Vorath had stopped in front of her desk and stared down at her with his one good eye. The other students had gone quiet, watching. "So, you are the human," Vorath had said, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. "I have read about your species. You are small. You are fragile. You have no claws, no scales, no natural weapons of any kind. Your planet has been spacefaring for only 2 centuries. Tell me, little human, what makes you think you belong in my classroom?" Lily had looked up at him calmly. "I am here to learn, Commander." Varth had snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pipe. Learning requires potential. I have yet to see any evidence that your species possesses it. He had moved on, but from that day forward, he never missed a chance to point out humanity's weaknesses. When discussing famous battles, he would mention how easily human colonies had been raided by pirates. When explaining defensive tactics, he would note how primitive human military technology remained compared to older species. Lily listened to all of it without showing any emotion on her face. She had learned early that showing emotion was considered weakness by most species in the Federation. So she kept her feelings hidden behind a mask of calm. Even when the words stung Dot, her only friend at the academy was a Volani named Zix. He was young for his species, which meant he was only about 40 years old in human terms. His translucent blue skin shimmered like water under light, and his 8 limbs were constantly in motion, tapping on surfaces or reaching for things. He had a curious mind and a kind heart, 2 qualities that were considered unusual among his people. Zix had approached Lily during her 2nd week at the academy, sitting down across from her at the lunch table without asking permission. "You are the human," he had said. It was not a question. "Yes," Lily had replied, waiting for the usual dismissive comment. Instead, Zix had leaned forward with genuine interest. "I have read 17,000 documents about your species since your arrival was announced. Humans are fascinating. You evolved on a planet with extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators, and limited resources. By all logical calculations, you should have gone extinct millions of years ago. Yet here you are." Lily had blinked in surprise. "Here I am. How did you survive?" Zix had asked. "What is your species' secret?" Lily had thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "We are stubborn. We do not give up even when we probably should." Zix had considered this answer carefully. Interesting. Most species would consider that a flaw rather than a strength. Maybe that is why it works for us. From that day forward, Zix and Lily had been friends. He helped her understand the complex social rules of the academy, and she helped him understand something his calculations could never capture: the unpredictable nature of human thinking. What Zix did not know, what none of them knew, was that Lily Carter was not just any exchange student. Back on Earth, she had grown up on military bases, the daughter of Colonel Nathan Carter. She had spent her childhood watching her father plan operations, studying maps and battle reports, learning the art of war from one of Earth's finest military minds. She was quiet and small and easily overlooked. But inside her head, she carried knowledge that would soon change everything. The attack came on a Tuesday, during the afternoon session on diplomatic protocols. Lily was sitting in her usual seat near the back of the classroom, taking notes on her tablet while the instructor, an elderly Falari named Professor Min, explained the proper way to address a Threll ambassador. The lesson was boring but important. Diplomatic mistakes had started wars before. Zix sat beside her, his 8 limbs moving quietly as he processed the information at speeds Lily could never match. Across the room, the Corvin students sat in a group, their scales gleaming under the classroom lights. The Falari twins, Kira and Cora, were whispering to each other in their own language. Everything was normal. Then the alarms began to scream. Red lights flooded the corridor outside. The classroom lights flickered and changed color, bathing everyone in an emergency glow. The floor vibrated as something heavy struck the station's outer hall. Students jumped to their feet, their voices rising in confusion and fear. "All students remain in your classrooms," came the automated announcement through the speakers. The voice was calm and mechanical, completely at odds with the chaos unfolding around them. "Station Nexus 7 is under attack. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Professor Min's fur stood on end, a sign of extreme stress in her species. She tried to calm the students, but her voice was lost in the noise. The classroom had 32 students from 8 different species, and every single one of them was now talking or shouting or making sounds of distress. "Commander," Vareth burst through the door moments later. He had clearly run from wherever he had been, his breathing heavy and his artificial eye glowing bright red as it scanned the room. In his clawed hand, he held a communicator that was producing nothing but static. "Commander, what is happening?" Professor Min asked, her large ears pressed flat against her head. "The Krath," Vareth growled. "They have come for the station." The name sent a wave of terror through the classroom. Lily did not know much about the Krath, but she knew enough. They were an insectoid species, warriors who lived for conquest and believed that only the strong deserved to survive. They had refused to join the Galactic Federation, viewing peace as weakness. Instead, they raided colonies and attacked ships, taking what they wanted and destroying the rest. No one had expected them to attack the Academy. No one had thought they would be so bold. "How many ships?" one of the Corvin students demanded. Vareth moved to the window and stared out at the darkness of space. Lily followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. Black vessels hung in the void like a swarm of giant insects. Their hulls were angular and sharp, covered in ridges that looked like the shells of beetles. There were 10 of them, maybe more, surrounding the station from all sides. Small pods were detaching from the larger ships and flying toward the station's hull, attaching themselves like parasites. "They are boarding us," Vareth said, his voice grim. "Those pods carry soldiers. Security forces on the lower decks have already engaged, but they are being overwhelmed. Communications are jammed. We cannot call for help. What do we do?" asked Kira, one of the Filari twins. Her golden fur was trembling. "We wait," Professor Min said. "We stay here where it is safe and wait for help to arrive." "There is no help coming," Vareth replied bluntly. "The nearest Federation patrol is 6 hours away at maximum speed. The Krath will have full control of the station long before then." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Some students began to cry. Others sat in stunned silence. The Villani students started calculating survival probabilities out loud, their numbers growing worse with each passing moment. 12% chance of survival if we remain hidden. 7% if we attempt to resist. 3% if we try to reach the escape pods. "Stop counting," Vareth ordered. "It helps nothing." Lily stood at the window, looking at the Krath ships. Her mind was not frozen with fear like the others. Instead, it was working, analyzing, calculating in ways that had nothing to do with mathematics. She counted the ships. 10 visible, possibly more on the far side of the station. She studied their formation, noting how they were positioned to cover all approaches. She watched the boarding pods, tracking where they attached to the hull. Her father had taught her many things during her childhood on military bases. He had taught her to read maps and understand terrain. He had taught her that battles were won through preparation and knowledge. Most importantly, he had taught her that every enemy had a weakness, no matter how strong they appeared. "There are approximately 200 soldiers," Lily said quietly. The room fell silent. Every head turned to look at the small human girl standing at the window. "What did you say?" Vareth asked, his voice sharp. 200 soldiers, Lily repeated, turning to face the class. Each Krath ship carries a standard complement of 20 soldiers based on their hull design. I can see 10 ships, which means 200 soldiers total. The boarding pods are attaching at 4 main points on the station, which means they are dividing their forces to converge on critical areas from multiple directions. Vareth stepped closer to her, his yellow eyes narrowing. "How do you know about Krath ship configurations?" "My father is a colonel in the Earth Defense Force," He fought Krath raiders on the outer colonies 6 years ago. I read all of his reports. Reading reports does not make you a soldier, Vorith said. No, Lily agreed. But it gives me information. And right now, information is the only advantage we have. She turned back to the window and studied the station's layout in her mind. She had memorized the floor plans during her first week at the academy, a habit her father had drilled into her. Always know your environment. Always have an escape route. Always be prepared. This classroom is located between the command center and the main hangar, she continued. Those are the two most important targets on the station. The Krath will send forces to both locations, which means they will pass through this section of the corridor. They will come through here. Professor Min made a small sound of distress. Then we must hide. We must find somewhere safe. There is nowhere safe, Lily said. The Krath are taking hostages. The students in this academy are the children of diplomats, scientists, and military leaders from across the galaxy. We are valuable to them alive. They will search every room until they find all of us. Then what do you suggest? Vorith asked. His tone was still skeptical, but there was something else in his voice now. Something that sounded almost like curiosity. Lily looked at her classmates. 32 students, each with abilities and strengths that their species had developed over millions of years of evolution. Scales that could resist damage. Eyes that could see in darkness. Minds that could calculate faster than computers. Limbs that could crush metal dot, and one human girl who knew something none of them did. She knew how humans had survived for millions of years on a dangerous planet. She knew how a small group could defeat a larger force. She knew the secret that had made humanity successful against all odds. We fight back, Lily said, but not the way they expect. The classroom was silent as Lily walked to the front of the room. Every eye was on her, watching the small human girl who had just suggested they fight an army of professional soldiers. Some faces showed disbelief. Others showed fear. A few, including Commander Vorith, showed reluctant interest. You want us to fight the Krath? Asked one of the Corvan students, a young male named Drax. His scales were dark green, and his voice was filled with doubt. They are trained warriors. We are students. We are not going to fight them directly, Lily replied. That would be stupid. They are stronger than us, better armed, and more experienced in combat. If we try to beat them at their own game, we will lose. Then what do you propose? Vorith asked. Lily picked up a marker from Professor Min's desk and began drawing on the wall screen. She sketched a rough map of the station section they were in, marking corridors, junctions, and rooms from memory. The Krath are good at what they do, she said as she drew. They are organized, disciplined, and they follow a clear plan. That is their strength. But it is also their weakness. She drew X marks on the map where the boarding pods had attached. They expect everything to go according to plan. They expect the people on this station to either surrender or try to fight back in ways they understand. What they do not expect is chaos. Chaos? Zix leaned forward, his translucent skin flickering with interest. Explain. Lily turned to face the class. Every species in this room has abilities that humans do not have. The Corvans have scales that can resist heat and cold. The Villani can process information faster than any computer. The Filari can see heat signatures in complete darkness. The Thrall have strength that could bend steel. She looked at each group as she spoke. You have spent your whole lives thinking of these abilities as natural, as ordinary. But to an enemy who does not know you, they are weapons. The Krath have studied the major species of the Federation, but they have not studied you as individuals. They do not know what you can do. And what about the Krath? Professor Min asked nervously. What do we know about them? Lily smiled slightly. It was the first time most of the students had seen her smile. "I know quite a lot, actually," she began to explain. The Krath were insectoid creatures, cold-blooded beings who relied on external heat sources to maintain their body temperature. In warm environments, they were fast, strong, and deadly. But in cold environments, their movements slowed dramatically. Their reaction times dropped. Their coordination suffered. The station has environmental controls that can adjust temperature in specific sections, Lily continued. If we lower the temperature in the corridors around this classroom to below freezing, it will slow the Krath by at least 60%. She turned to Zix. "Can you access the environmental systems from here?" Zix was already moving toward a maintenance panel on the wall. "There is a secondary control node behind this panel. I can interface with it directly, but it will take time to override the safety protocols. Do it." Lily turned to the Corvin students. There were 5 of them in the class, all large and intimidating. "Your scales will protect you from the cold better than most other species here. I need you positioned at the 2 main entrances to this corridor section. But you will not be fighting directly." Drax frowned. "Then, what will we be doing?" "You will be the visible threat. The Krath will see you first and assume you are the main resistance. They will focus their attention on you while the real attack comes from elsewhere. You want us to be bait," Drax said, flatly. "I want you to be a distraction," Lily corrected. "There is a difference. Bait gets eaten. Distractions create opportunities." She turned to the Folari twins. Kira and Kara looked frightened, their golden fur still trembling. "Your species can see infrared light, correct? You can see heat signatures even in complete darkness?" Kara nodded. "Yes, but we are not fighters. We have never hurt anyone. I am not asking you to hurt anyone. I am asking you to be our eyes. When the lights go out, the Krath will be nearly blind, but you will be able to see everything. You will tell the others where the enemy is, where they are moving, and when to strike." One by one, Lily assigned roles to every student in the classroom. The Villani would manage communications, creating a network that the Krath could not jam. The Thrall would block key corridors, using their strength to move heavy furniture and equipment. Even Professor Min, old and frightened, was given a job. She would use her empathic abilities to sense when the Krath were approaching. Vorath watched all of this in silence, his arms crossed over his chest. When Lily finished giving assignments, he finally spoke. "And what will you do, human? What is your role in this plan?" Lily walked to a storage cabinet near the door and opened it. Inside were maintenance tools, equipment used for repairs around the station. She selected a small device about the size of her hand. It was a laser cutter, used for cutting through damaged panels and wires. Not a weapon, just a simple tool. "The Krath operate as a unit," she explained. "They are connected through a communication network that links every soldier to their captain. It allows them to coordinate perfectly, to move as one force. But if that network goes down, they become individual soldiers instead of an army." She held up the laser cutter. "Their captain carries the communication relay. It is a small device attached to his belt. If I destroy it, they lose their coordination." "You are going to attack the captain directly?" Vorath asked, his voice carrying a hint of disbelief. "You are smaller than a Krath juvenile. They will crush you, only if they see me coming." Lily looked at the ceiling. "I have studied the station's ventilation system. The shafts are narrow, but I can fit through them. While everyone else is fighting in the corridors, I will be above, watching and waiting. When the moment is right, I will take out the relay." The room was quiet. Every student was looking at Lily with new eyes. This was not the quiet, overlooked human girl they had ignored for the past 3 months. This was someone else entirely. "This plan is insane," Drax said finally. "Yes," Lily agreed. That is why it might work. The Krath expect us to be afraid. They expect us to hide or to fight in ways they can predict. They do not expect 32 students to turn this section of the station into a trap. They do not expect us to use the environment against them. And they definitely do not expect the human girl to crawl through the ventilation and destroy their communications. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. I know you are scared. I am scared too. But we have one advantage that the Krath do not understand. We have each other. 12 different species, each with different abilities, working together in ways that no one has ever tried before. She paused and took a breath. On Earth, we have a saying. The battle is won before it is ever fought. It is won through planning, through preparation, through knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. We have 20 minutes before the Krath reach this section. That is enough time. She turned to face the door, her small frame silhouetted against the red emergency lights. Let us get to work. 20 minutes passed like seconds. The students worked in frantic silence, each one focused on their assigned task. Zix had pulled open the maintenance panel and connected himself directly to the station systems, his 8 limbs dancing across circuits and wires. Frost was already beginning to form on the walls of the corridors, outside as he lowered the temperature degree by degree. The Thrall students had moved heavy equipment to create barriers at key points. Desks, storage units, even the professor's podium were dragged into position to create obstacles that would slow the Krath advance. The Corvins took their positions near the main entrances, their scales gleaming in the red emergency light. Trying to look as threatening as possible, Lily had climbed into the ventilation shaft through an access panel in the ceiling. The space was cramped and dark, barely wide enough for her to crawl on her hands and knees. The metal was cold against her palms, and she could hear the distant sounds of fighting somewhere far below. Communications network is active. Zix's voice came through the small device in her ear. He had created a closed system that the Krath could not detect or jam. All students are connected. Good, Lily whispered back. Everyone stay quiet and wait for my signal. She crawled forward through the shaft, her breath fogging in the freezing air. Below her, through the metal grating, she could see glimpses of the corridor. Empty for now, but not for long. The first Krath soldiers appeared 3 minutes later. Lily watched them through the ventilation grate, holding her breath. They were terrifying up close. Each one stood over 6 feet tall, with bodies covered in hard black shells that looked like armor. Their heads were elongated, with compound eyes that reflected the emergency lights like dozens of tiny red mirrors. Their arms ended in clawed hands that held plasma rifles with practiced ease. There were 40 of them, moving in perfect formation. At their front was the captain, larger than the others, with markings on his shell that indicated his rank. On his belt, Lily could see the communication relay, a small black box with blinking lights. 40 hostiles entering Corridor 7, the Folari twins reported. They are moving in standard formation. Captain is in front. Confirmed, Lily whispered. Everyone hold position. The Krath moved down the corridor, their clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. Their breath came out in visible clouds now as the temperature continued to drop. Some of them were beginning to move more slowly, their joints stiffening in the cold. What is this? The captain growled in his own language. The translation software in Lily's ear converted his words automatically. Why is it so cold? Environmental malfunction, perhaps, one of his soldiers suggested. Find the young ones and let us leave this frozen place. They continued forward, approaching the first barrier that the students had built. The Corvins were visible on the other side, their scales protecting them from the cold that was slowing the Krath. Hostiles ahead, the captain announced. 5 reptilian young. They appear to be armed with improvised weapons. He made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Capture them. The Dominion will pay well for Corvin specimens. The soldiers moved forward, their rifles raised. They were focused entirely on the visible threat, exactly as Lily had planned. Now, Zix, she whispered. The lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the corridor. The craft soldiers froze in confusion, their compound eyes struggling to adjust. In the warmth of their home world, the transition would have taken only seconds. In this cold, it took much longer. Infrared active, Cora reported. I can see them perfectly. They are confused, clustered together near the first barrier. Corvins, fold back slowly, Lily ordered. Draw them further into the corridor. The Corvin students retreated, making noise to attract the Krath attention. The soldiers followed, stumbling slightly in the cold and the dark. Their perfect formation was beginning to break apart. Thrall, prepare to engage, Lily continued. When I give the signal, push the second barrier forward. Do not try to fight them directly. Just knock them off balance and retreat. Understood, came the rumbling response. Lily crawled forward through the shaft, positioning herself directly above the captain. He was shouting orders now, trying to maintain control of his troops. But his soldiers could not see each other clearly in the darkness, and the cold was making them slow and clumsy. Spread out, he commanded. Find the environmental controls and restore the temperature. 3 soldiers broke away from the group, heading in different directions. That was exactly what Lily wanted. Divide the enemy. Make them weaker. The Lani team, the 3 soldiers heading towards Section B, are passing your position in 10 seconds. Be ready. The Villani students had positioned themselves in a side room with the door slightly open. They could not fight the Krath directly, but they had something better. When the soldiers passed, the Villani triggered the fire suppression system they had rigged to activate manually. A wave of chemical foam erupted from the ceiling, covering the 3 soldiers completely. The foam was not harmful, but it was slippery and blinding. The soldiers fell to the ground, thrashing and confused, their weapons useless. 3 hostiles neutralized, Zix reported. 37 remaining. In the main corridor, the remaining Krath were approaching the second barrier. The Thrall students waited in the shadows, their massive forms barely visible even to the Falari's infrared vision. Now, Lily commanded. The Thrall pushed forward with all their strength. The barrier, made of heavy equipment and furniture, slid across the floor like a battering ram. It struck the front line of Krath soldiers and sent them crashing into the ones behind. In the cold and the dark, they could not brace themselves or get out of the way in time. Chaos erupted. The perfect Krath formation dissolved into a mess of falling bodies and shouting voices. Soldiers fired their weapons blindly, hitting walls and occasionally each other. The Corvins struck from one side, using their claws to disarm soldiers before retreating. The Thralls struck from the other side, using their strength to throw soldiers against walls. The captain screamed for order, but no one could hear him over the confusion. This was the moment. Lily pushed open the ventilation grate and dropped silently behind the captain. He was focused on his troops, trying to restore order, and did not sense her approach. In the darkness and cold, his reactions were too slow. She reached for the communication relay on his belt. Her fingers closed around it. The captain spun around, one clawed hand sweeping toward her. But Lily was already moving, diving under his arm and rolling away. The laser cutter flashed once, slicing through the relay's casing. The device sparked and died. Immediately, the effect rippled through the Krath forces. Without the relay, they could no longer hear each other's communications. They could no longer coordinate. Each soldier was now fighting alone, blind and cold and confused. The network is down, Zix confirmed. They are no longer connected. All teams advance. Lily ordered. Take them down one at a time. Do not let them regroup. What followed was not really a battle. It was a hunt. The students knew the corridors better than the craft. They could see in the dark while the soldiers could not. They could move freely in the cold while the crafts were struggling just to function. One by one, the soldiers were surrounded, disarmed, and restrained using cables and straps that the students had prepared. Within 20 minutes, it was over. Lily stood in the middle of the corridor, the laser cutter still in her hand. Around her, 40 craft soldiers lay restrained on the ground or slumped against walls, defeated. None of them were dead. She had made sure of that. Killing was not the goal. Victory was. Commander Vorath approached her slowly. His artificial eye glowed as it scanned the scene, taking in every detail. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he did something that no Corvan had ever done to a human before. He bowed his head in respect. You have done the impossible, he said quietly. You have defeated an army with students and tools. How? Lily looked at him with tired eyes. I did not do it alone. Every person in this section played their part. I just helped them see what they could do. She turned to look at her classmates, who were staring at her with something approaching awe. The small human girl who had been overlooked for 3 months had just led them to victory. On Earth, she said, we learned a long time ago that you do not have to be the strongest to win. You just have to be the smartest, the most prepared, and the most willing to do whatever it takes. She smiled slightly. The craft forgot that lesson. I hope they remember it next time. The battle was over, but the war was not. Lily knew this even as her classmates celebrated around her. The craft had sent 200 soldiers to take the station. She and her group had defeated 40. That left 160 soldiers still fighting throughout the station, still taking hostages, still moving toward their objectives. We need to spread the word, she said, cutting through the celebrations. Other sections of the station are still under attack. If we can share what we learned, others can fight back too. Zix was already working on it. His 8 limbs flew across his improvised control panel, connecting to communication nodes throughout the station. Within minutes, he had established contact with 3 other classroom sections that were still holding out against the craft. Lily recorded a simple message. She explained the weaknesses of the craft, the importance of using environmental controls, the tactics of distraction and division. She sent it to every classroom that could receive it. You are not helpless, she said at the end of the message. Every species has abilities that can be used in ways the craft do not expect. Work together. Use what you have. Fight back. The message spread like fire through dry grass. In Section C, a group of Phalaris students used their empathic abilities to project feelings of confusion and fear into the minds of craft soldiers, disorienting them long enough for others to attack. In Section F, Villani students hacked into the station's gravity controls and created localized gravity surges that pinned soldiers to the floor. In Section K, Thrall students simply picked up unconscious soldiers and threw them at the ones who were still awake. Every section adapted Lily's tactics to their own situation. Every section found ways to fight that the craft could not predict. Within an hour, the tide had turned completely. The craft commander on the lead ship watched in growing disbelief as reports came in from his soldiers. Casualties were mounting. Objectives were not being achieved. Hostages were fighting back in ways that made no sense. How is this possible? He demanded. These are children, students. They should be cowering in corners, waiting to be captured. Commander, one of his officers said nervously, our communications relay on the station has been destroyed. Our forces are no longer coordinated. And there are reports of something else. What? A human. A small female. She seems to be directing the resistance. The commander's compound eyes narrowed. He knew very little about humans. They were a minor species, barely worth noticing. But something about this situation was deeply wrong. Before he could give new orders, his sensor officer called out in alarm. Ships incoming. 3 vessels, approaching from hyperspace. Reinforcements? The commander asked hopefully. Negative. They are not ours. The officer paused, studying his screens. Configuration unknown. But the signals matched those of human military vessels. The commander felt something he had not felt in decades of warfare. Fear. 3. Ships dropped out of hyperspace with a precision that made the Krath vessels look clumsy. They were smaller than the Krath cruisers, less intimidating in appearance. But there was something about the way they moved that spoke of absolute confidence. They did not hesitate. They did not slow down. They came straight for the Krath fleet like predators who had spotted their prey. The lead ship was the Lincoln, and its captain was a man named Daniel Harris. He was 45 years old, with gray hair at his temples and scars on his hands from a lifetime of military service. He was also Lily Carter's uncle, and he had been racing toward the station from the moment the distress signal had reached Earth's outer patrol. "Attention Krath Dominion vessels," he announced across all frequencies. His voice was calm, almost casual, but there was iron beneath the words. "This is Captain Daniel Harris of the United Earth Defense Force. You have attacked a Federation facility containing a human citizen. You have exactly 90 seconds to withdraw from this sector." The Krath commander laughed, a clicking sound that echoed through his bridge. "3 ships against our fleet? You humans are as foolish as the report suggested. We will destroy you and continue our mission." 80 seconds, Harris replied. The Krath commander ordered his ships to attack. 10 vessels turned toward the 3 human ships, weapons charging, confident in their superior numbers. They were still confident when the first human ship disappeared, not destroyed. Just gone. One moment it was there, the next it was somewhere else entirely. It reappeared behind the Krath formation, where no weapons were pointed, and fired a precise shot that disabled the engines of the rearmost Krath vessel. The second human ship did the same thing, blinking across space in a way that the Krath sensors could not track. Another vessel lost its engines. "What is happening?" The commander shouted. "Track them. Destroy them." But the human ships would not stay still. They moved through the Krath formation like shadows, appearing and disappearing, striking and vanishing. They did not fight the way the Krath expected. They did not form battle lines or exchange volleys. They used the Krath's own size against them, staying in blind spots, targeting weak points, never giving the larger ships a clear shot. Within 10 minutes, half the Krath fleet was drifting in space with disabled engines. The other half was trying desperately to retreat, but the human ships were everywhere, blocking every escape route. The commander finally understood what his soldiers on the station had experienced. This was not warfare as he knew it. This was something else. This was a hunt. "Withdraw," he ordered, his voice hollow. All ships withdraw immediately. The remaining Krath vessels jumped to hyperspace, fleeing in disarray. They left behind their stranded soldiers and their disabled ships. They left behind their pride. On the station, Lily heard the news and allowed herself to smile. An hour later, Captain Harris walked through the docking port and found his niece waiting for him. She looked tired and dirty, her hair escaping from its ponytail, her clothes stained with chemical foam and lubricant from the ventilation shafts. But she was alive. He hugged her tightly. "Your father is going to lose his mind when he hears about this." "I know," Lily said, "but everyone is safe. That is what matters." Harris pulled back and looked at her face. Behind her, he could see students from a dozen species watching them with expressions of wonder and respect. Commander Vorth stood among them, his arms crossed, nodding slightly. "Captain Harris," Vareth said, stepping forward, "your niece has done something remarkable today. She organized the defense of this station using tactics we have never encountered. She turned students into soldiers and tools into weapons. She defeated trained craft warriors with nothing but her mind." Harris nodded, pride evident in his eyes. "That is what humans do, Commander. We have been doing it for millions of years. When we cannot win with strength, we win with cleverness. When we cannot win alone, we find allies. When we cannot see a way forward, we make one." He looked at Lily. "Seems like my niece inherited the family talent." In the weeks that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. The tale of the human girl who defeated an army became a legend. The Galactic Federation, which had barely noticed humanity before, suddenly began paying attention. Ambassadors requested meetings with human leaders. Scientists wanted to study human psychology. Military commanders wanted to understand human tactics. Lily Carter returned to her classes at the academy. She was still quiet, still unassuming, still preferring to sit at the back of the room. But now, when she walked through the corridors, every species stepped aside, not out of fear, out of respect. Commander Vareth still taught his tactical simulations class, but his lessons had changed. He no longer dismissed humans as weak and primitive. Instead, he used Lily's defense of the station as a teaching example, showing other students how a small force could defeat a larger one through planning and creativity. One day, after class, he called Lily to his desk. "I owe you an apology," he said gruffly. "When you arrived, I dismissed your species as irrelevant. I was wrong." Lily shook her head. "You are not wrong about everything. Humans are small and fragile compared to most species. We do not have claws or scales or the ability to calculate faster than computers. Then, what do you have?" Lily thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "We have stubbornness," she said finally. "We refuse to accept that we cannot win. No matter how bad things look, we keep fighting, keep trying, keep looking for solutions. It is not always logical. It is not always smart. But it is who we are." She smiled slightly. "And sometimes that is enough." Vareth considered her words, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is why your species survived on your dangerous planet. Perhaps that is why you spread to the stars so quickly. You do not know when to give up." "No," Lily agreed. "We really do not." Somewhere far away, in the dark regions of space where the craft Dominion licked its wounds, commanders discussed what had happened at Station Nexus 7. They analyzed the battle, studied the human tactics, and tried to understand how a single girl had defeated their best soldiers. They never found a satisfying answer, but they reached one conclusion that would change the galaxy forever. Humans were not to be underestimated. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were not to be attacked at all. Because if one human child could do this, what would happen when all of humanity decided to fight? That was a question the Croth never wanted to answer. And so, in the end, Lily Carter